builder. Actually, I thought he was an architect. And then I realized he's a community. I bet he is an architect. He just doesn't want to admit it to me. All right, so Peter French is a community builder with deep experience in real estate, economic development, entrepreneurship, public-private partnerships, and manufacturing. Peter is the president of home builder Rising Barn, co-founder of the San Antonio Entrepreneur Center, director of operations for the Plum Creek Development. He's the founder also of the 501c3 called Free Flow Research, and he also serves as a director for Choose San Antonio, SA Ecosystem, and the French oil mill machinery company of Piqua, Ohio. Peter's a graduate also of Trinity University. He lives with his wife Carolyn and their 3 children right here in San Antonio. Without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome community builder Peter French.
Hi. If you are not awake, that's okay. If you are feeling like dozing off, by all means, please do so. I am going to kick things off by dropping my papers, and then I'm going to take an ill-conceived selfie. But I can't really see you all. I think I got the light backwards here, but it's, there we go. A few of you, 1, 2, 3, good. So that blinding flash, remember that always. Thank you very much, PechaKucha. Thank you, Corey. Thank you, Yanaguana Gardens. So I'm going to talk about the built environment and how it is harmful to us in many instances, but we are all lucky enough right now, right here, to be in the place that is the antidote. And there are far too few of these. It's pretty special. It's a gathering spot. It's a third place where we come together. We feel comfortable. We let our guard down. Great things happen. We might meet our spouse, our significant other, our next ex-spouse. You just never know. Just roll with it. It's cool. You guys have been in good spirits for a long time, so I'm going to click the button, and here we go. Boom. So, formal introduction. Hello, PechaKucha. French shall be your tribal leader for the next 6 minutes and 40 seconds as I share a little bit about how our physical communities shape and impact our social lives, our health, and our well-being. So if you have not watched The Martian, and you intend to, this is a spoiler alert, please cover your ears, but Matt Damon, seen here playing astronaut and space pirate Mark Watney, survives for 4 years alone on Mars, with his only human contact being email and FaceTime, kind of like folks who live in Converse or East Kyle, places where there's just no there. And while stuck on Mars, Mark Watney does not have the opportunity to bump into people on the street, to engage in spontaneous social interactions with a group of squirrels or Alan Weinkrantz, and not surprisingly, his attitude and health suffer. So what we've grown to understand is that where we live not only influences how well we live, but also how long we live. Social isolation, and it took me a while to say that, social isolation, whether caused by NASA or some other force, is many times, 45 times actually, more harmful to our bodies than smoking or obesity or even alcoholism. So today in America, 1/4 of us live alone, 1/4 of us experience some form of depression, and a remarkable 1 in 9 of us are taking some form of antidepressant. The rising rate of depression is consistent across the Western world, but not so for our grandparents, and not so for people living in tribal environments. It's not growth that's harming us, it's the way we've grown. Over half of the world's population now lives in urban areas, but we're not building our cities at a human scale. For far too many of us, the world we occupy is like astronaut Mark Watney's. We spend our nights eating boiled potatoes alone. But kids understand the difference between real places, between cities and suburbs, between rural places and nature. Because as humans, we value and are comforted by the spaces that look and feel like real places. Yet despite this fact, An unfortunately large segment of the real estate industry, of which I'm one, is convinced and works hard to convince the rest of us that how we feel when we're in a place doesn't matter. And most city building codes support that outcome by default. Yanaguana Gardens is obviously not one of them. And paradoxically, while the number of people in our households is declining, and the time at which we marry and buy a house is declining, the average size of a U.S. home has ballooned by 61% since 1973. And Winston Churchill said, "We shape our dwellings, and afterwards our dwellings shape us." And that was the shape of depression. But just a mile from that home, we built a community called Plum Creek on the belief that there's an intrinsic value in the creation of great places. And the residents of Plum Creek tell us time and time again they thought the porches and mailboxes were cute when they moved in, and only later, after they'd been living there, did they discover that the neighborhood's design literally changed the way they lived. And these confessions almost always begin with a disclaimer: we're not weird, but. Since moving to Plum Creek, we've gone on vacation with our neighbors, we have impromptu dinner and block parties, and walking to school has made our children more confident. Their physical environment altered their social lives. But the world does not want to be changed. We tell ourselves that driving is freedom, that drive till you qualify makes sense, and we've forgotten to ask ourselves the basic question: is this working for me? What if I didn't have a half-an-hour commute or a $200,000 mortgage? And if we can get ourselves to mentally challenge the status quo, the door is open to think more deeply about where and how we live. Why do we compare homes almost exclusively by their price per square foot? What does that actually tell us about the cost of ownership, about the experience of living there? I think nothing. And in reality, we're forced to compare homes by their price per foot because housing has been marketed as a commodity with no other defining feature save its number of bathrooms. It's built without regard for its occupant or the land on which it sits, and builders stop making neighborhoods and instead have created mini storage. And we've been trained to believe that our world is built by others, and that our only option is to rent what's for lease or buy what's for sale. But the age of WeWork and Airbnb, Uber and Tesla, pop-ups like Canvas have started to experience a new world in which that is no longer true. I think we're beginning to believe that we can take ownership of every aspect of our lives and influence in new and powerful ways the world in which we live. Each of us has the power to connect our relationships, rebuild our community, and even refill our neighborhoods. So the average US home is now 2,600 feet and costs $250,000. So the fuck what? The average temperature on Mars is negative 81 degrees. Neither of these facts has any bearing on where we live or how much we should be willing to spend to do it. These are 2 blocks in the San Antonio Dignity Hill neighborhood, and we're building an 800 square foot home with a 200 square foot accessory dwelling unit on a long vacant lot right next to Florence Alley. Because that's what the family wants, and we kind of think that should be the point. We believe that refilling neighborhoods, starting right in our own backyards, is the way to deliver housing for everyone. Why 2,600 feet? Why not 600 feet? Why $250,000? Why not $50,000? We've discovered that the tiny home movement isn't actually about scarcity or sacrifice, it's about choice and opportunity. What does San Antonio need, and what can San Antonio afford? That should be the decision matrix. We believe that we are all community builders, that building is a prescription for action, and that our actions have the power to make our lives better, happier, and healthier. We believe that together, we can change the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So, I like the social isolation thing about how, that really is, it can be considered unhealthy, and as opposed to living with people, living in a community, living closer to people, living together. So that basically means I can smoke and drink all day, and I'll be all right if I live around a lot of people, is what you said, basically.
Yes, absolutely.
So just thinking about, though, how do you argue against community building when you still have people who may prefer that social isolation that you're talking about, or at least living in neighborhoods that are far removed from the city, living away from areas like this that they're working on right now to be a place where people can live closer together and live closer to what's happening. So, overall it's a mindset thing, and it's kind of probably impossible to sort of figure out historically where that began. But how do we change it? I mean, what are some of the specific things we can do, or just name one thing that we can do to shift, make that mental shift to where we're actually just thinking about that in terms of moving away from those isolated areas and maybe being closer together?
Well, I don't believe in telling people where they should live, but I do think people should be helped to understand that how they feel when they're in a place matters, and that the place actually influenced their health and their feeling and how they interact with other people around them. We know that road rage is a interesting thing that happens when we get in our car and we feel like we're tough and protected in a big metal box. That doesn't happen in the same way as you're walking down the street, as you're interacting with other human beings. We know that people have lived in tribes and villages for 1 million+ years, and only very, very recently, within the last 2 or 3 generations, did we stop doing that. And I think what we're seeing is we're getting progressively unhealthier, and it's not because suddenly the world is depressed.
Right.
So just giving people the opportunity to experience the difference. It's like, when you have a cold and you're like, oh, this sucks so much. The next time you don't have a cold, you're like, oh, I feel so good. My health matters. I'm so blessed to have my health. Well, that happens in real places too.
Right.
So maybe you have a sign that just says, hey, welcome to Yanaguana Gardens. Doesn't this feel kick-ass? Like, don't you feel better than when you're sitting on 281?
Right.
And you just pause and like, I do feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Why is that? Well, if you want to learn more, go to the next sign. Walking is actually way better for you than Zoloft, so they've proven that study a couple of times.
Well, you hit on a whole other issue there too. Yeah, I mean, this is all about mental health and all about physical health as well, because they're both completely interconnected. And so, it's fascinating stuff. Just to think about how we could change as a world, through some of these things that you're talking about is once again very inspirational. So thanks again, Peter.
Thank you very much.
All right,
Thank
Peter
you.
French, man. Woo!